you so much for joining us. Really excited to have your perspective on stage today. Obviously, you served the 26th District of Florida for many years. Since then, you've been a fellow at Harvard and Columbia and the University of Chicago, so you've got some great perspective. But today, you're representing the Coalition to Empower Our Future, where you're serving on the board of directors. Can you tell us a little bit about the coalition and what got you involved?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for convening us. Thank you all for being here. This conversation is critical, and it means a lot to me in many ways, but especially as the father of two teenage daughters. The Coalition to Empower Our Future seeks to, much like you're doing here today, convene a national conversation on this very important issue. And by the way, thank you for the opportunity to talk about happiness. You know, your friends at NBC News and MSNBC and Telemundo call me to talk about a lot of things, never happiness. So even though I love them, this is a special opportunity. But the Coalition to Empower Our Future understands that this is a complex issue, a multifaceted issue that needs a wide range of solutions. And in order to find those solutions, we need to bring all the stakeholders together: parents, young people, educators, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, clinicians, because this issue is too important to just kind of try to check the box and say, like, oh, we're going to pass a tax credit for low-income families, or we're going to make public investments or regulate. I mean, it's so much bigger than that. So the coalition really wants to have a meaningful conversation, and we want that conversation to lead to the full suite of solutions that will help us address this in a meaningful way.
That's great. And obviously you all focus in on, youth mental health and well-being. And what do you think are some of the most significant factors impacting the state of youth happiness today?
Look, this is the number one issue for young people in the country. I mean, according to the CDC, 1 in 7 young people in this country have some kind of mental health issue, behavioral issue. So this can be found in every family, obviously in every community, every city, every state, the whole country. And this is, your question is kind of the point. There are so many factors. And I've seen all of this as a parent, as a school board member, when I would visit schools, all kinds of schools, low-income schools, higher-income schools. They all deal with this in a different way. But, you have bullying, which there's been, for a couple decades, a good amount of awareness around bullying and how best to handle that. There's obviously economic issues, economic stress. I mean, we know what housing has done to so many families in this country by, stressing their economics and just making it hard for them to have the kind of social mobility that yields stability and happiness. You have, peer pressure. A lot of the issues that we have all become familiar with and more sensitive to over the last couple decades. These are all big factors. And of course, we've heard a lot today about social isolation, parents that aren't as engaged with their children as they should be. And I think that's all of us. I mean, sometimes we're at home and we realize we hadn't seen one of our daughters for 3-4 hours because she's just in her room. So again, the factors are many, and that's why it's critical to have this broad conversation, this inclusive conversation, so that as we develop the solutions, we have all the input we need.
Absolutely. And as you all have been researching and reviewing all those factors, do you think today's young people are experiencing more severe mental health challenges than prior generations?
It certainly seems that way. I mean, a part of this is that we as a society, and this is something we should celebrate, we've become more sensitive to a lot of these issues. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I was down or something, my mom, God bless her, say like, just ignore it, you'll be fine tomorrow, whatever. And didn't really take the time to figure out if it was something more serious or not. I think we've become better at that, and that's why we are more aware of these issues, and maybe statistically these issues are showing up more than they used to. But I also think there are a lot of new factors, right? And certainly technology is one of them. Kids don't play outside as much as they used to. They don't make the kinds of meaningful social connections that I think we used to as children, probably generations before us used to do even more. So I do think this situation is particularly acute in the current generation.
And I want to pick up there where you left off. As we heard from the last panel, this year's World Happiness Report, finds and reinforced that social connections are significantly enhancing the well-being of young people, but at the same time, that social disconnection is growing, increasingly prevalent among young adults. How do you think society can work to help solve that disconnection and loneliness epidemic?
Well, the good news is this is an issue or a factor where we can all make a contribution. I mean, we can all reach out to a young person, whether it's a child of ours or a nephew or a niece or a grandson, and just try to connect with them, ask them questions, or do something meaningful with them, take them somewhere, go on a fishing trip, whatever it is, right? We can all make contributions. From the perspective of Coalition to Empower Our Future, we're looking for partners, nonprofit partners that are out there trying to encourage the kind of social connectedness that we know we need for a healthy society, that we know we need to meaningfully address these youth mental health issues. So we're looking for partners all over the country that are willing to invest in this space, that are willing to raise social awareness, partner with schools maybe. We know that for lower income families in particular, people who have to show up either to the office or to a job site, it's harder to have that human interaction even within the family. So what can we do to fill those gaps? What role can schools play? After school programs, all of these, from the very beginning, we talk about how the suite of solutions has to be broad and comprehensive, and this is why, because every community has different challenges, every family has different challenges, and if we're going to help bring people together to help our society heal, it's going to require a very broad effort, and the conversation has to be sincere. Again, it can't just be like a check-the-box type of effort where we say, well, mental health, okay, maybe we threw some money at it, maybe we regulated a couple companies, and now everything's okay. It's just not going to work that way.
No, that makes sense. And I want to ask you to put your legislator hat back on. During your time in Congress, you served on the House Committee on Education and Workforce. You were leader in the Problem Solvers Caucus. There's a lot of relevant experience there. But prior to that, worked closely with the Miami-Dade School Board. Share with us, how did that experience in government shape how your perspective on this issue? And especially as you mentioned, be looking forward here, what do you think is working well and what's not working?
Yeah, when I was on the school board, my children were very young, so I didn't have a full perspective on this, but I remember visiting schools, and this was back 2010, 2011, 2012, and the teachers were the ones sounding the alarm back then. And they were talking about how much harder it was for them to do their jobs now because the kids were just not in a good mental place. And the teachers were dealing with a lot of issues that when I went to school was the counselor. You go to the counselor to deal with the issue, but there's so many, it's so prevalent, and it manifests in the classroom in ways where the teachers have to deal with it. So I really gained an appreciation at that point as to how widespread this was. And again, Ben, it wasn't just in low-income schools, because we know that there are issues that are associated with lower income. There's correlations, but this was everywhere, from the lower income schools to the middle income schools to the higher income schools, every race, every cultural background. So visiting those schools really, that's when I first kind of became sensitive to how widespread this was and how it was not just isolated incidents the way we maybe used to think about all of this. And in terms of the policymakers, I certainly think we've done a great job of raising awareness with regards to this issue. I mean, everyone knows this is a challenge, and everyone knows that the government and more broadly society has a role in addressing it together. But I think we're still not there in terms of this idea of broad, comprehensive solutions. And we all know, having been a member of Congress, you want to check the box sometimes. You want to be able to go back home and say, I did this or that to address mental health or whatever the issue is. This issue really requires a whole lot more than that.
definitely. And looking at some of those boxes that are I think trying to be checked in different places, lots of policies out there, both in the states and in Congress, aimed at addressing youth mental health. Which of those do you think is headed in the right direction? Are there other things you think lawmakers should be doing to address this right now?
Look, I think all the policies that are designed to build community are very important, or to encourage civil society. Yeah, I remember I was a student at the University of Miami in the early 2000s, and we had to read a book for a class called Bowling Alone. And this was in the early 2000s, about how social isolation had become such a major challenge, and how we didn't come together back then as a society the way we used to in decades past. Now it's, I don't know, 10 times worse, and obviously the pandemic exacerbated all of this. So for now, while we're still kind of gathering information, data, input, bringing all these stakeholders together, I think policies that are aimed at building community, at making sure that young people whose parents maybe aren't home have a place to go after school, have people to talk to, have ways in which they can express their anxieties, their fears, their frustrations. All of that helps, and it prevents tragedies, because of course, we know about the most dramatic cases of violence that make national news, but every day in school districts throughout this country, educators are dealing with young people who are struggling and who are acting out in ways that can be dangerous and harmful to others. So, I think for now the best we can do is make sure that we're investing as a society in this kind of social safety net to catch these young people who are struggling. But we certainly have to do a whole lot more, and that's kind of the purpose of the Coalition to Empower Our Future.
Definitely. Well, and as we heard, throughout today, investing and reinforcing those communities is what ultimately leads to more happiness and more well-being. So it's a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Congressman, for joining us, and thank you to the Coalition for participating in today's event. Thank you all.